attorney with Hunter McLean. He has two grown children. You'll hear more about this. I know Wade in this way. He and I have worked out together for the past 15 years, almost every morning, and so we have talked about everything from what TV shows did you watch as a child to the loss of the American democracy. And the loss of the American democracy is what has catapulted him into this decision to run for the U.S. Congress. And with that said, I hope you'll listen closely, and I hope you'll be curious, and I hope you'll ask as many questions as you can of Wade Herring. If that's a good enough introduction, we'll bring the candidate forward.
All right. I'm going to turn the camera to make sure the camera is there. And,
You want me to stand or sit? Which is better?
yep, get comfortable.
Okay, I'm going to stand then. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you both in person and via social media. As was said, my name is Wade Herring and I'm running for Congress. I want to start by telling a little bit about my background and how I came to the decision to run, and then what issues are important for me. As Tom said, I grew up in Macon, Georgia. My mother still lives there. My father worked for vocational rehabilitation, which means that he helped disabled people get training and education and jobs. My mother was a public school teacher, taught high school English for 30 years. And through my parents, I saw that government can do good things for people in everyday ways. Both of my parents were public servants. I've worked since I was age 14. I got my first job digging ditches in a pecan grove in Perry, Georgia. Turned out the pecan grove belonged to Sam Nunn. I didn't know it belonged to Sam Nunn. I knew the small business owner across the street from my parents who hired me to work on that job. One summer, I worked on a tobacco farm. You really can sweat through a pair of Levi's by 10 o'clock in the morning. And when I wasn't in the tobacco fields that summer, those of you who like to garden have probably bought bales of pine straw at the nursery. Well, that means somebody had to go out into the woods and fork up that pine straw and bale that pine straw and load it on the back of a flatbed truck. So I worked on that crew that summer also. I went away to college, worked my way through college. I had a scholarship, a loan. It was my loan, not my parents' loan, and a work-study job. My parents helped to the extent that they could, but as I said, they were public servants, and I had two sisters coming up behind me. I came back to law school to the University of Georgia. That's where I met my wife, Susan. Susan and I have been married 39 years as of Labor Day weekend. And as Tom mentioned, we have two children, a son who is a lawyer in Atlanta and a daughter who is a doctor in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Our son is married to a law school classmate, and he and his wife are expecting our first grandchild, a boy, on December the 24th of this year. And that little boy is one of the reasons that I'm running for Congress, is because I'm concerned about the future of our nation for our children and our children's children. In 1985, I came to Savannah, Georgia to work with the law firm of Hunter McLean, and it was my great privilege to work with Malcolm McLean for the last 15 years of his life. Malcolm McLean was mayor of the city of Savannah during the early 1960s, and it was Mr. McLean during the summer of 1963 who met with civil rights leaders like W.W. Law and Eugene Gadsden. He sat at the table with them, he listened with them, he involved the religious community, he involved the business community, and the city of Savannah peacefully integrated in the summer of 1963 with the leadership of that group of people working together. That's an example of when democracy can work That was ahead of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in January of 1964, Martin Luther King said that the city of Savannah was the most integrated city south of the Mason-Dixon line. When Mr. McLean ran for re-election, he lost, and he never went back into politics. But I always admired his courage and his leadership during that trying and difficult summer. And I wondered from time to time, when my country called, would I have the courage to step forward and answer that call? In my law practice, I've typically represented small to medium-sized businesses, helping them not only understand the law, but also do the right thing. And since March of 2020, what I've really done is practice COVID law, not something I ever studied in law school, but trying to help businesses figure out, how do we stay open? How do we keep our employees healthy? How do we keep our customers healthy during this pandemic? And I have to say, I heard the discussion about eviction relief. There's been a shocking lack of federal leadership in the 1st District during the pandemic. And that's wrong, and that needs to be fixed. So in the business community in Savannah, we were really felt like we were on our own trying to figure this out. How do we keep going and at the same time keep people healthy? So January of 2021 rolls around. I'm not planning to run for Congress. I'm very engaged with my law practice. I'm very engaged in my community, as I have been throughout my career. And then came January the 6th. And I was at work, as I typically am, and I started hearing people in the halls talk about what is going on in Washington. And then I started getting email alerts from friends, but also from news services. And because we all have our computers, I was able to upstream the news and watch in real time as an insurrectionist mob overran the Capitol. I was shocked, I was upset, I was angry, I was saddened. I could not believe that something like this was happening in my lifetime. I never dreamed that such a thing would happen. I left work early that day and went home. Susan, my wife, and I sat on the couch glued to the television, anxiously wondering what was going to happen to the future of our nation. And of course, it's not a coincidence that occurred on January the 6th. That was the date the electoral vote was to be certified, and the people who overran the Capitol did so with the express purpose of overturning the election. We don't have to guess that's what they wanted to do. They've said so over and over again. Now, there were some brave things that happened that day. And for me, what I will always remember are the young women, the interns who were responsible for the box that the electoral votes was in, and they secured that box to safety. And that's America at its best. Those young women, probably making very minimal salaries, if anything, but they had the presence of mind to get that box off to safety. But there were some horrible things that continued to occur that day, even after the mob had been cleared from the Capitol. And for me, one of the horrible things that I saw that day was when 6 representatives from the state of Georgia stood on the House floor to vote to overturn the election. And on the front row was Buddy Carter, the representative from the 1st District. And he violated his oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution. And again, I could not believe what I was seeing. Buddy Carter is not some abstract personage to me. I know him. He lives in Pooler, I live in Savannah. It's Chatham County. He and I have served on boards together. Our children went to school together. He and I go to church together. We both sit in the balcony pre-pandemic. He always sits on the far right. I sit in the middle. That's absolutely a true story. But this was somebody I knew, who I expected to have the backbone to do his job and to put his country first, and he did not. He put his party first, and he put his personal interest first. And it's not the first time he's done it, but it's the first time he ever did it when it was about our democracy and the peaceful passage of power to the duly elected party and the duly elected president. It's deeply, deeply offensive to me. I knew I had to do something public in response to hold him accountable. And at the end of January, I published an open letter to him in the Savannah Morning News. And I asked for him to apologize, and I asked for him to resign. And of course, I never heard from him. My friend Tom Kohler, who you heard from, did not want me to write the letter and publish it. My wife did not want me to do it because they were scared of what kind of pushback, what kind of blowback I might get in these divided times that we live in. But the response that I got was overwhelmingly positive. And from that positive reaction from people from all over the state of Georgia, people I didn't know, some I did know, of course, but many I did not know, from that positive reaction came the conversation, Wade, won't you run for Congress? And obviously I've decided yes, and that's why I'm standing here this morning in a rainy Saturday, November in Camden County, because I've decided I need to run for Congress and to hold the incumbent accountable and let him know that what he did is not okay. So, that's why I'm here. What is it I'm about? Because you've got to be for something. You can't be simply against something, right? So I'm against what Buddy Carter did, but what am I for? Number one, I'm for protecting the right to vote. And who thought in the year 2021 we would have to be talking about protecting the right to vote? But we must talk about it. It's a straight line from what happened on January the 6th to what happened in the General Assembly here in the state of Georgia. It's a straight line from what happened in the General Assembly to what they're trying to do now in Fulton County to take over the election process in Fulton County. And if they're successful in Fulton County, rest assured it'll be Chatham County and Richmond County and Bibb County and Muskogee County after that. So we've got to have federal protections for the right to vote. That's not a federal overreach. That's what the Constitution says the Congress should be doing, is fundamentally protecting the right to vote. What other things? Infrastructure. And the bill passed last night in the House, and that's going to mean jobs for Americans. It's going to mean a past due investment in America. Guess who voted against it, as far as I can tell? The incumbent voted against it. Part of the infrastructure, of course, includes things like bridges and roads, but it also includes expanding broadband. That's not a luxury anymore, it's a necessity. The pandemic has taught us that. People need access to broadband for education and health care. What else? Education. We've got to invest in our young people, and we've got to invest in them early, so good quality childhood care early on in the child's life, early childhood education, so we don't have children who are behind before they even get started. Health care. And the pandemic, again, has taught, all of us know now about underlying conditions, right? And here on the coast of Georgia, we have statistically high incidence of hypertension and diabetes and other underlying conditions. So if we invest in health care, and invest in health care early, so people have access to health care, affordable health care, early in their lives, and they don't even ever get those conditions, or they can manage those conditions. And when people tell me, well, I don't want to pay for somebody's health care, my response to that is you're already paying for somebody else's health care. When someone shows up in the ER because they haven't managed their diabetes and they've got a gangrenous wound and now they're going to lose that limb, you have paid for that person's health care. And now you're paying because that person got removed from the workforce. When a woman who hasn't treated her hypertension properly ends up in a hospital in Savannah for open heart surgery, you're paying for that woman's health care, and probably she also now is removed from the workforce. So let's invest in people, and let's invest in people early in things like education and healthcare. Environment. Let's get real and call it what it is. It's climate change. And again, here on the coast, we're going to see the impacts of that sooner than the rest of the state. They're expecting coastal flooding this weekend for a variety of reasons. My son, when he lived in Savannah, he worked out on Tybee Island. There was one spring where he would have to call or check the Weather Channel to see if he could get to work because Highway 80 out to Tybee would be flooded. So let's admit the reality of climate change. Let's get ready with the proper infrastructure, and then let's try to mitigate against the further damage of climate change. And when we talk about environment, of course, we've got this pristine coast here in Georgia with these wonderful barrier islands. We're not the Gulf Coast of Florida. We're not Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, thank goodness. The district includes the entire coast of our state. And so the congressperson who represents this district is in a position of special stewardship to protect this coast. And of course, the Altamaha River Basin, one of the great river basins of the world, not just the United States, of the world, let's make sure that's protected. The Okefenokee Swamp, let's protect that. And let's protect the water source as it comes down here into the southeastern part of the state. It's hard for me to understand how mining in the Okefenokee is a good idea. So what I'm really talking about, as I talk about things like voting and infrastructure, healthcare and education, is a congressperson who is a good neighbor to the families and to the people of this district. Someone who looks after the people of this district as I would want them to look after me. Someone who reminds us that we are a community and that we are all tied together. You deserve a representative who puts the people of this district first, ahead of party and ahead of personal self-interest. You deserve a representative who is going to think and be creative, and not just someone who is reading from the playbook that he's been handed by somebody else. You deserve a representative who actually wants to serve in the House of Representatives. Our incumbent has said he'd rather be a senator. He said that. He admitted that. He doesn't even want the job. Let's make sure he doesn't get to keep the job. So those are that's how I came to make this decision. Those are some of the issues that are important to me. I put my law practice on pause to devote my full time to this effort. We're off to a good start. We've got a lot of support in Liberty and Chatham County. I've got to work the rest of the district, and I'm not forgetting about Camden County. That's why I'm here this morning. I'm going to need everybody in the district to work with me, to help me, to vote for me. Tell your friends about me. We've got a website. Spread the word on social media. And I'm going to work hard. Like I said, I've worked since I was 14. No one's going to outwork me, and I'll be back. And church is a very natural space for me. If I get invited to the churches, I'll be there. And I want to hear from the people of Camden County in this part of the state about what's important to you. So that concludes my prepared remarks. If there's an opportunity for questions, I would love to hear the questions.
So we're going to take a look, make sure any questions that are coming in from Facebook or coming in from Zoom. Take a look at the Zoom side. And of course, us here in the room, if you have questions, now is definitely the time. What's your position on universal health care? From Cassie?
Yeah. I think there needs to be a strong public option for health care. One of the things that the pandemic taught us is that health care cannot be exclusively tied to your job. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs in March of 2020, and fortunately we have the Affordable Care Act there. And interestingly, there are more choices available now on the exchange than there were previously. The choices are better and they are less expensive than they were previously. And when you look at the number of new people signing up through the exchange, Georgia is the third highest state next to Texas and Florida, which illustrates again the importance of that public option. If you're asking me, would I be in favor of Medicare for all as a replacement for all private insurance, the answer to that question is no. A big part of what we have to do as a nation is compromise and find common ground. I don't think the Medicare for all option will work because I don't think our brothers and sisters over on the right side of the aisle are going to vote for that, quite frankly. I don't think it will work. So we've got the Affordable Care Act in place. They tried to kill it repeatedly. It's working better than it did before. Let's keep working to make it better. That would be my position on health care and a public option.
Yeah, wasn't offered insurance for my work for a while, so I looked at the healthcare marketplace, and the options were fairly expensive if you don't get a discount for income or whatnot, and they weren't really that great things either. So, I guess just wanting something better. I know every other developed country in the world pretty much has universal health care, so I just feel like that's something that we should be striving for. Whether or not our Republican counterparts are in favor, they are fairly extreme to their right, so I really think that we shouldn't have to settle for what they will compromise on.
Well, let me respond in a couple of ways. Do I think we should keep working for universal health care? Yes, I do. Just to get to the Affordable Care Act, though, was a huge battle, which we've been fighting, by the way, since the Truman administration. Finally got through in the Obama administration, and then, as we all know, there were repeated efforts to kill it. So it got off the ground on a pretty rocky start. Especially because of the pandemic, though. It seems to me that people understand the importance of that and the importance of having that in place, and it seems to be working better. Perfect is the enemy of do. If we're always working for perfect, we're not going to get anything done. And compromise somehow has gotten to be a bad word in our political discussion. That's hard for me to understand. As was said, I've been married 39 years. I know a lot about compromise. Compromise is the reality of the human condition. And if our goal is all or nothing, we end So I hear you absolutely. The exchange doesn't work as well as it should. But let's work on what we can do, and what we can do is make that better. The incumbent, what he wants to do, and has said repeatedly, is to kill it. I want to make it better. Let's get me in office so I can help make that happen.
Next question?
I'd be interested in any thoughts that you have of congressional review of the Justice Department. How do you think that stands now, and what kind of changes or improvements do you think? Because the way I look at it, when the Constitution was adopted and our government was set up, the legislative branch was number one. That's the first part. Executive is second. Judicial is third. And we have, I know one senator who sits in office now, who very honestly said that the three branches of government were the executive, Congress, and the Senate. He didn't even mention the Justice Department. So I'm just real concerned about how our Justice Department works and any kind of congressional oversight. What do you think needs to be? How it should work? How do you think we're doing now, and what do you think needs to happen?
Sure. So the question, for those of you listening remotely, is the role of Congress vis-a-vis the Department of Justice. So the Department of Justice, of course, is part of the executive branch, and the Congress should and does have oversight over the executive branch, including the Department of Justice. I think a big part of how well the Department of Justice works is who the Attorney General is. Based upon what I know, I have faith and confidence in Merrick Garland. And the Attorney General, of course, is supposed to be the attorney for the people of the United States. He is not supposed to be the personal attorney for the president. I think the previous Attorney General got mixed up in what his role is. I think he thought he was the president's personal attorney. That's not the role of the Attorney General. And so the Attorney General gets confused about what his job is. Is he representing the people, or is he representing the president? And certainly I think it's appropriate for the Congress to exercise its oversight responsibility to be that check and that balance on the executive branch, including the Department of Justice. And I think, to answer your question more broadly, that part of the issue, quite frankly, is too oftentimes the Congress has ceded too much power to the executive branch and has not been that check and balance on the executive branch. Now, does that get messy and sloppy? Yeah, but that's the way democracy works. So I think there's a role for it, but the specific example I'm thinking about there is the War Powers Act. I think the Congress perhaps ceded too much authority over to the executive and did not retain enough of its own authority about when this nation decides to put its young men and women at risk overseas. What else?
accepted in Congress that they were going to do something about it, they were gonna honor it, they were going to, do something with consideration for all 600 workers that were affected, but nothing ever happened. Or at least nothing ever happened in favor of those 600 individuals. Did I say that right, Jane?
I'm talking on cross the line.
Okay, she's typing it, I'm gonna read it. But, I gotta ask, have you, prior to this, meeting today, have you individually heard of the Thycall Memorial Project?
I had not specifically heard of the memorial project, but I had heard of course, what happened here.
So the question is, will you support honoring the 30 fallen patriots with the Congressional Gold Medal and establish a Thycall Memorial National Park here in Camden County? That's the question.
And the honest answer is I do not know the standards for honoring people with the gold medal, but do I think the people who died in the Thycall disaster should be remembered nationally and appropriately honored and remembered nationally? The answer to that question is yes.
Other questions?
Not to state, but you said that earlier that Congress does have oversight over election standards.
Yes.
And of course, you know the fight that's going on right now about the John Lewis Act and it has been stalled so many times. If you are elected to Congress and if we can't get this thing through, what do you think needs to happen to establish oversight over election standards? Because it's just obvious to me that Congress should have oversight. It's in the Constitution, but how do you think we could go forward with this?
So the question is, how can we go forward to establish that there's federal oversight for election standards in states? The number one thing we can do is make sure that Democrats control both houses of Congress. So again, let's get a Democrat, let's make history. Let's get a Democrat in the first district. We haven't had a Democrat in the first district in about 30 years. Folks, if we put a Democrat in the first district of Georgia, I guarantee you we will make history. We will be national headlines if we can make that happen. So let's help make that happen. Because I guarantee you if it's a Republican-controlled House, there's not going to be any federal legislation about voting rights. There will not be. So the House is by a slim majority right now, but it's still the Democrats who control the House. As we all know, the Senate is tied, and because of the filibuster rule, that's where the logjam is in the Senate. So the second thing we got to do, and this is just real practical nuts and bolts, we've got to make sure in November that Senator Warnock gets reelected to the Senate, because if he's not reelected, then there will not be any federal oversight of elections. So, the conventional wisdom is in an off year that the party in opposition to the president takes control of the chambers, right? That's the conventional wisdom. So the conventional wisdom is that 2022 is going to be a bad year for Democrats. Let's prove them wrong on that. Let's make sure that we protect our democracy, and let's make sure we have Democratic majorities in both chambers, and we will take care of protecting voting rights at the state level.
All right, so I've got a question. Okay. So that's on one question. Second question is more of a statement than a question. The national park will honor all 600 workers, Army, Navy, Coast Guard, 16 cities, police, fire, medical centers. What is your position? And this is a continuation from the request to support honoring the 30 fallen patriots with Congressional Gold Medal.
Well, as stated earlier, I think there should be national recognition and a national way to honor those people who died in the Untitled disaster. And I'm not sure how else to answer that question other than that.
Will you support the Democratic agenda if elected? The True North. What is this, 1971? True North. I don't understand this question.
Okay. Well, I am a Democrat. If elected, I will support the Democratic agenda. But let me be clear about this. The Democrats I'm concerned about, it's not just Democrats, it's Democrats and Republicans, it's everybody in the first district. So if I'm elected, my job will be to represent everybody in the first district. How do I think I can best represent everybody in the first district? It's by advocating for those things I talked about already: infrastructure, education, healthcare, voting rights. Those are the kinds of things that would be important to our neighbors and to our families in the first district, and those would be the things that I would advocate for. Environment, uniquely important to our district. Those are the things that Democrats talk about and try to advocate for. That's why I'm a Democrat. That's where my values are. That's how I line up.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we're back to the topic of compromise. So it seems like there's kind of this talk in Congress that they compromise with each other. But really, in reality, Congress and their viewpoints are becoming less and less reflective of our country as a whole, of the average American. So we get kind of tired of hearing that you guys are compromising with each other about things that don't actually represent what we want as people. For instance, universal health care has about 63%, according to Pew Research, of the American people support it. So if the American people support something, then that should be something that you as our representatives fight for, and instead of kind of like be compromising with these other people who are so out of touch with the American people, that you need to be listening to us. And what we need, if Democrats keep trying to find some middle ground and taking baby steps for things instead of like doing things that really need to be done to help people that need health care and food and get out of poverty, things like that, and the wealth inequality keeps increasing, then they're going to keep losing voters.
Well,
May I add to that?
yes.
If I don't phrase that ironically, with wanting to talk about the spine of the issue, because this is not just about the issue of Medicare for all. Basically, it represents a continued lie that is maintaining the division of the country. The idea of holding to a public option is based on this idea that it will hurt the average person to go into a public service. Excuse me, I do have public speaking problems sometimes. The idea is that supposedly using Medicare for all would raise the burden on the average person. So, okay, what I'm trying to get to is that the real design of Medicare for all is that taxes are raised on those who can afford to pay more to society because they have frequently proven their ability to invest in themselves wholesale without issue. And with that money, we pay for the health care of everyone. It will not raise taxes on the average person. It will not hurt the average person. And this has been proven across Europe, in other places throughout the world. The idea that this is a compromise also is a misnomer, because we have had multiple periods where we had the power to push it through. 2010, we had a trifecta, as we did during this term. And by allowing this misinformation about Medicare for all, we're not giving some trade-off with the other side. We're saying we're not even going to fight for what would actually help people. We're not even going to present the issue that we have seen the majority of America wants, that we have seen the country or the world prove works over and over. We're not even going to fight for the optimal version where everyone is actually taken care of. We're going to continue letting companies convince everyone that they will suffer over lies. And to me, that's not saying we're going to compromise. That's saying we're going to be spineless.
Okay. And both questions, let me say, I hear and I understand your frustration and even anger, and I hear and understand the frustration where all the other developed nations in the world have some sort of universal health care coverage. I totally get that. And by the way, it works. I mean, it works in Canada, it works in Great Britain, it works. I hear you. I look at the history of the United States, and I look at the history of where we are today, and I do not see a reasonable, feasible path forward to get universal health care coverage passed at this moment in our history. So again, to get to the Affordable Care Act, that was a battle that went on from the Truman administration up through the Obama administration. One of the reasons Hillary Clinton was so disliked is because she was willing to take on health care as First Lady in Bill Clinton's administration, and it failed, and she got tagged with that. Obamacare, affordable health care, comes along, and again, we finally get that through because Democrats control the process. And what happened? Repeated efforts to kill it. Here in the state of Georgia, they won't even take advantage of federal money to expand Medicaid. It looks like the bill that Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff have been working on is going to take care of that. So would it be better perhaps, or definitely based upon data and experience of other countries, to have universal health care? I would agree with you. Can we get there right now? And can the Democrats stay in control of the Congress advocating for that right now? I think the answer to that question is no. We can't get there right now, and no, we can't continue to control both houses if that is the position that we take right now. We can't even agree right now in this country about wearing face masks or not, or getting vaccines or not, or what we should be teaching in our schools or not. I don't think Democrats can win if we're going to do this all or nothing type approach, even if the facts, even if the experience of other countries says that would be the way to go. And so that's what I'm talking about when I talk about compromise. I'm talking about what can we do so that the right people win and can stay in office. That's what I'm talking about.
To my question, I fully understand every word that you stated about the times we live in and what can possibly be achieved with the group that we currently have. Statement. The purpose of meeting candidates, interviewing candidates, is for the purpose of hiring our voice in Congress. If, for whatever reason, the people we review, we meet with, are unable to accomplish our goals, then we, as the employers, have to continue to look for individuals that can do, proverbially, the job. What must we do, in your opinion, here's the question, what must we do to facilitate an environment that will allow us to have universal health care in Congress? What is your position? How do we get there from here?
Well, again, I think nuts and bolts, we keep control, we Democrats keep control of the House, and we Democrats keep control of the Senate. We know that if the Republicans control the House and the Senate, we're not going to get universal health care. We know that. So let's put people in place who are willing to work toward that goal, even if they recognize that right now where we are, we may have to take compromises. But the goal would be to get there to universal health care. I mean, our health care system, you know, to the extent that questions are coming at me, you're preaching to the choir. We have an enormously expensive, enormously inefficient healthcare system that does not deliver the way it should. In the state of Georgia, we have the highest maternal mortality rate in the United States. That shouldn't be. That absolutely shouldn't be. I know all of those things, and that's why I talk about health care in my platform. I want to get nurse practitioners and physician's assistants and GPs and doctors of internal medicine down into the system, down into our rural counties, and delivering health care on the front end. And I want to find better ways of paying for it. And I want to make sure that states that haven't expanded Medicaid yet, there are only 12, Georgia's one of the 12, do that. So that would be the direction that I would be working for. But am I going to stand here and promise you that I'm going to stand on universal health care? And right now, where we are in a country, I don't think that's workable. I think that would be dishonest for me to advocate that, quite frankly. And in the first district, if you look at the composition of the first district, I think that's going to be a loser for me in the first district. There've got to be, I think, some moderate people who have traditionally voted Republican, who are saying to themselves, this party has changed. This isn't what I've traditionally voted for. I don't know what's going on. I'm looking for a different kind of candidate, and I'm hoping I can be that candidate for those people and that I can get elected.
So, should we choose you, what would you need from us as a group to assist you in creating an environment?
Well, I need your enthusiasm. I need your support. I need you to tell other people about my candidacy up and down the district, outside the district. I need your financial support. I need all of the above. And then friends and neighbors about how important health care is for all of us. You know, it's about being a good neighbor to each other. It's about taking care of each other. It's about building a community. I mean, healthcare is so fundamental to all of those things that, you know, we've got to get past this anger and division that we find ourselves in and talk about the fundamental things that are important to people. The cultural war, noise, that's, I think, so many times intentionally distracting from what's really important for all of us. And it's things like taking care of our families, making sure our children are educated, making sure our children and ourselves and our parents have good health care, and that we've got good roads and bridges. And when we get distracted in all this other stuff, let's get the conversation back to just being good neighbors to each other.
I just have another comment. I just disagree with the stance that, like, playing kind of a more middle ground, like sticking with Affordable Health Care Act, things like that, kind of more middle ground, you actually get more voters. I think the opposite is true. The more progressive things in universal health care things that will actually help people are more popular. For instance, universal health care is more popular than the Affordable Health Care Act now. And so you actually want people to be voting for you to be advocating for you that will actually help them instead of a program like the Affordable Health Care Act, which has a lot of problems and isn't even that popular.
I hear what you're saying. I understand it.
Because I think if we actually pass something like universal health care, when we have the power to do so, it would be very difficult for the Republicans to try and overturn it because it would actually work and people would actually benefit from it.
I hear what you're saying. I'm an optimist, but I'm not optimistic that that it would be that easy. I don't see that happening that way.
And I know too that millennials are the biggest voting bloc now, that they are overwhelmingly more progressive than past generations, and so just being aware of what our voting blocks and our voting populations are voting for and get behind and actually fight for is really important too.
I hear you.
Anybody? Great discussion. Healthcare, I'm not going to limit this topic to the healthcare for me. It's completely lateral in many, many areas. My position is if we hire you for Congressional District 1, we want to see a performance that looks like you represent Congressional District 1. I realize you are not able to go in and take Congress by force as an individual, and that you must create relationships to get things done. The word compromise, while sounding great as a person of working with groups and being a team player, we're not looking for the compromise, we're looking for results. When you hire somebody to do a job, we want to see results. So basically, this group can't be Democrats. I can't speak about the rest of Congressional District 1. We've taken a position of holding our elected officials accountable. If we participate in hiring process and you get hired, you are going to hear from us again. And should we feel like we're not being heard, then we'll look for a replacement. That's all any group really wants. If we bring you on board, you're supposed to sound like us. And I know it's more than one county in Congressional District 1. So we're working with other counties to have a single voice. If you go in and you start sounding like Buddy Carter, joining the other teams, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. We're going to make it known. And they were like, man, you guys just voted for him. Yep, we did. Now, we're looking for a replacement. He just got there. We know.
I can promise you, I will not sound like Buddy Carter, and I will not do things like Buddy Carter. I can promise you that. I'm not going to sound like him. I'm not going to talk like him. I'm not going to parrot whatever the playbook is. I would say this, though. The representative for the district has to be a representative for the entire district. And so we're Democrats here together on this rainy Saturday morning, but not everybody in the district thinks and feels the same way that we do. And in terms of getting hired for the job, you gotta get the job. If you don't get the job, you don't get to do anything. If I don't get this job, I get to go back home to Savannah and go back to my quiet life, right? So I've got to get the job to be able to do the job for everybody in the entire district. Again, we've had 30 years in the wilderness without a Democrat from this district. That's a long time. Now, the children of Israel had to wander for 40 years. Let's not make it 10 more years. Let's put a stop to it right now, okay? Let's do that right now.